So the idea for Greenplaces was pretty simple. If the problem takes everybody, but only the top 1% of businesses currently has solutions, how do you bring solutions to everybody else? And technology does a great job at that, because we can basically build a virtual chief sustainability officer in a product where if you're a company that is required now to submit carbon footprints and reach goals, you can just buy Greenplaces, automate data ingestion. You can understand where your carbon footprint is. It can tell you what to do, and we can help you reach your goals without having to go out and build that team.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond Bain Spotlight series, where we're talking with Bainies from across the globe about their journeys beyond Bain. I'm Yaz Ketraside, part of the global alumni team here at Bain & Company. As we celebrate Earth Day on April 22nd, it's a great reminder to reflect on our strides in environmental protection and acknowledge the ongoing need for further action. I'm looking forward to our conversation today with former Bainie Alex Lassiter, who's actively contributing to this cause. Our moderator for today's session is Jen Andrasco, our Executive Vice President and Global Head of Alumni at Bain & Company. She initially joined Bain in 2010, gaining experience across various industries, later ventured into leading her alma mater's Alumni Association at the University of Virginia, before boomeranging back to Bain in 2020. We're fortunate to have you both with us today, and I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jen to get us started.
Yes, thank you so much. And this is such a treat for me today, not only to celebrate the incredible work that Alex is doing. It's also great to be able to reconnect with Alex. Alex and I were teammates together at Bain eons ago, long before we were both parents, I think, and both married. So we can talk about those journeys as well. Alex, it's great for you to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Alex is the founder and CEO of Greenplaces, a software company aimed at simplifying sustainability for businesses. Before starting Greenplaces, Alex co-founded Gather Technologies, a successful software company that served thousands of businesses in the hospitality sector. As Yaz mentioned, he began his career at Bain in 2010. We overlapped there, primarily working with private equity group, gaining valuable experience across different industries. Alex is a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he was a Moorhead Keynes Scholar, and where he currently serves on the Board of Visitors as well as a guest lecturer. Alex continues to be involved in venture investment and advising of software companies. Alex, thanks so much today for joining us. Looking forward to hearing about your journey at Bain and beyond to Greenplaces.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited to get the chance to chat, and it feels crazy to be this far away from beginning my career at Bain and speaking as kind of like an alumni. It's very, very great. So thank you, and definitely an honor to be included.
Well, we're thrilled. We feel honored that you came back. Let's start with a little bit about your Bain experience. Alex, can you tell us about your journey to Bain? Like, how did you end up choosing Bain & Company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was definitely one of those students that I think could never really wrap their heads around what they wanted to do. And we had a professor at Carolina who had come over to kind of create this consulting concentration at UNC. And I think the way he pitched it was, if you're smart and you don't know what you want to do, then come here. And I was like, that's great. I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'll just kind of go along with that. But I applied and got an internship at Bain. Actually, the year after Eve Carson did, who I knew pretty well in college. I had such a great experience. Like, I just had a really great summer experience. John LaRusha was my first boss, which he's still a good friend today. I got exposure into so many different industries so quickly. And I think when I came back to school, I just knew that this is just such a great platform and a place for me to kind of start my career and learn how to learn efficiently and well, and get exposure to kind of how the world works. So I had a great time.
Favorite Bain memory?
There's so many. I mean, there's things that are like kind of the memories of like being up until 2 or 3 in the morning and PEG with a bunch of my friends that I'm still really close with now, and just like all of the inside jokes around it. But one of my favorite memories was not the departure in the sense that it was bad that he left. Bob Lonergan was one of my favorite people at Bain. And when he did leave, we all got together and we recorded a video kind of spoofing LeBron James decision on where to play basketball, and Bob, which we called LeBron again, on doing the same thing. It turned out to be a big production. We spent a lot of time doing it, probably time that we should have spent doing work, but we just had such a good time. It was so funny. And I still talk about it today. Bob reached out to me like 2 months ago and we talked about it. So I think it was probably something along that, but it's just that camaraderie of working together and, with such good people. I just really enjoyed the experience.
Knowing that the people and the experience and those shared that shared camaraderie that we all experience at Bain makes it incredibly difficult to leave when folks decide to leave and move on to their next chapter. Tell us a little bit about your decision to leave Bain and what came next for you.
It was probably irresponsible, but I think, I'd spent most of my time in PEG, and the reason for that was, one, I loved John and I loved Matt Guard and that whole team. But I just learned so much about how people create businesses, and I never really had exposure to that. I think growing up, I was pretty much decided that people were either, bankers or lawyers or doctors. And, sometimes you do some other things in between that, but I never really understood how value is created and how businesses are really begin. And in PEG, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you work with a lot of people that create something. They see a problem, they go out and figure out how to solve it. And I think it was a good opportunity for me to be able to see how you can kind of create something of value to build something for yourself. And so I was very much on the track, I think, of going through the AC program, likely going out and trying something, maybe going to business school and eventually kind of coming back. But I had a good friend, Nick Miller, who also shared some of my kind of entrepreneurial aspirations. And, we talked about it on a kind of weekly basis over the course of the fall of, I think, 2021, and ultimately just decided it was time to try to figure out if we could do this. And I sat down with John and told him that that I wanted to start something, and we were going to go out and try to do it. And he was super supportive. And it's funny, 10 years later, he starts his own company, and we talked a lot at the beginning of that too. And so it was just a really fun thing to do and very supportive amongst everybody. And now I've got multiple Bainies who are investors in my current business, and I'm investors in their business. And it's turned out to be a really, really fun group of people to be around.
I'll comment that case team that Alex, you and I shared. I think all the ACs actually went on to be entrepreneurs. So you went and started Gather Technologies, and Chetan Jabari went off and became an entrepreneur, and then Will Hockey, or ACI, went on. I feel like it is very much part of the DNA, right? And particularly with our associate consultants, to exactly your point, you get exposure to how businesses are being built, and there definitely is this, I think, a very high entrepreneurial spirit, even within Bain today, that we see, a number of our colleagues go off and start and try their own businesses. I know when you went and started Gather, it had multiple iterations, right? I remember speaking to you in the early days when you were thinking about when you and Nick were just starting Gather. And it wasn't then what it ended up being, right? As you sold a successful company later on, it looked actually quite different. Talk to us a little bit about your Gather technology journey.
Put it lightly as iterations, but I would say we pretty much failed 4 businesses over 2 years and almost sent us into bankruptcy. Gosh, we learned so much, and each iteration was a little bit different than the last one, but they weren't new ideas. I think there's certainly people who come up with one idea and it just works, and we weren't that. We were the scientific method meets an opportunity. It was, here's a big problem, and here's kind of what we think solves it. And when it didn't, we would kind of dissolve the business, but find the one part that was real, and we'd kind of reorient towards that. So think about it the way that a scientist isolates a variable and continues to drill down. And after enough processes of distillation, you eventually come to something of value. And that's what happened with Greenplaces. So I think it originally started as a business to help people navigate online reviews for restaurants. And it ended up with an enterprise platform to help restaurants and hotels manage events and catering and private dining and large groups, which sounds like two completely separate things, but there was a thread of things that we followed through that got us there. And frankly, it's pretty similar to like the way a case interview starts, where you start with a big problem and you just kind of box it down into smaller ones, and eventually, if you trust the process, you'll figure it out. And one of our colleagues, Zach Bray, I remember he told me that a lot of times it's just, you have enough time to run through enough iterations, because if you keep making smart choices, you'll eventually get there. But most companies, run out of time. And so I think if you follow the good process, and it's definitely a Bain process, you can get to something. And that's frankly what we were able to do.
Yeah, this notion of running out of time, Alex, is a really interesting one. Yeah, I think we hear from friends and colleagues, and as we talk with both Bainies and alumni about what they want to hear when we're talking with successful entrepreneurs, this idea always comes up of like, how do you have enough gumption to know that you can leave? And then how do you know like that you can stay with and stick with something long enough to get it to be successful? And there's inherent risk, right, that's associated with that. How did you think about that at that phase in your life? And then I'd love to actually translate that to as you started Greenplaces, right? Because a decade apart, a very different familial situation, right? So like, how do you think about those risks?
It was much more youthful exuberance when I started Gather. I mean, when I started that company, Nick and I were 22 and 23, and frankly had almost no fixed expenses. We had car payments and things like that, but I lived in an attic behind a Chinese restaurant, on like $400 a month. I mean, it was like insane how little money I spent. And I can't do that today. But I would say in that business, we spent years trying to figure something out. And I think that's the hardest thing about an entrepreneur is there is this level of like, you have to be, I think, a little bit crazy or a little bit pathological to believe that you can solve it. But it's a thin line between that and just completely wrecking your career. And I was pretty close to that. So I think like, you never really know. And I don't know if there's not a perfect answer. I think it's gut and being smart and thinking and weighing opportunity value and risk, and betting on yourself. And ultimately that's what I've always tried to do. I think when I did this the second time, I was playing from a much different position. We had sold the business for, almost $500 million. And, we had a good exit for ourselves and we had connections. I mean, Nick and I when we were, we didn't know anyone. Nobody would give us the time of day. But now, we had built a career of knowing people and doing good by people. And we had people to call and people who would listen. I think people trusted me more because I'd done this before, not necessarily to be just as successful or not, but that career progression and the maintenance of your personal network is really important. And I think if there's a takeaway for me, when I first got the job at Bain, I remember my dad said, look, it's a great job. I mean, you can't pick a better company to start, but he said, you need to make sure you invest in the people around you, because the people you start this business that you start a Bain with 20 or 30 or 50 years from now, this is your network. These are future CEOs or future partners. These are smart people. And you really need to make sure that you invest in those relationships. And he was right. And I think a lot of the value for me and Bain is staying connected to the Bain family. I mean, it's just an amazing group of people. And, many of them are back at Bain and Partners now. And many of them are entrepreneurs or investors or founders of things. And if you keep those relationships open and, do good by people, then the second or third or fourth time you get to actually start something, it gets a lot easier.
I think incredibly wise and sage advice and guidance for anyone that's listening, Alex. And I think you have, masterfully done that, right? Those are hard skills to develop over time. So thanks for sharing your story there. And I think it's actually an awesome transition to talking about really the heart of what we're here to talk about today, which is the incredible work that you're doing in and at Greenplaces. So could you start maybe by just giving our audience an overview of what you do at Greenplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Greenplaces almost 3 years ago this month. It was the day before Earth Day, which is a huge miss by us to not wait one day to found the company. It started largely because I read an article that said Facebook floats solar panels in the South China Sea to bring renewable energy to their Singapore office, which is an incredible sentence, and something that the first part of me thought, wow, that's incredible. The second part of me thought, well, who else can do that? I mean, that's just such an incredible task. If we believe that sustainability is important and we believe we have to reach our climate goals, what Facebook is doing is vastly different than what the rest of the world's going to be able to do. And so we had this thought of if sustainability goals are going, if getting to our climate goals involves everybody, there's the have and the have-nots, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Fortune 500s. They've got tools and they've got sustainability teams. They have people who can navigate this stuff. They have budgets. They can really, really be leaders. But it's going to involve everybody to get there. And these middle market companies, these non-Fortune 500 companies, are really going to struggle because they cannot invest in the resources to do these things. They can't build out a sustainability team. So the idea for Greenplaces was pretty simple. If the problem takes everybody, but only the top 1% of businesses currently has solutions, how do you bring solutions to everybody else? And technology does a great job at that because we can basically build a virtual chief sustainability officer in a product where if you're a company that is required now to submit carbon footprints and reach goals, you can just buy Greenplaces, automate data ingestion. You can understand where your carbon footprint is. It can tell you what to do, and we can help you reach your goals without having to go out and build that team. So that was kind of the idea of the business at the beginning, and we've been fortunate that the market has kind of responded really well in that capacity, and are really optimistic and bullish about where things are headed. The next largest group of people trying to figure this stuff out are not the biggest companies in the world. It's all their suppliers and vendors, and that's really where we help.
So you're focused really on that middle market supplier ecosystem.
Yeah, we're the sustainability solution for the suppliers and vendors of the Fortune 500. There's companies that are great for the Fortune 500, a Watershed or a Persephone are awesome at that. But those solutions do not work, for their vendors and suppliers. That's what we specialize in. It's easy to implement. It's all inclusive, and it has everything that you need, but it's very specifically built. We'd be a terrible customer for like Microsoft, but gosh, we work with a ton of Microsoft suppliers. We're really, really good at that.
And Alex, I'm curious, you mentioned with Gather, there was a lot of evolution of the business, right? How has that looked different with Greenplaces? Are you largely on the same mission with the same business model that you started on when you first started Greenplaces, or have you evolved?
The initial mission was to democratize access to sustainability, and it's still the same. But what's changed is when we targeted our ideal customer profile, we basically said big enough to care about it, and small enough that you wouldn't go hire out a sustainability team. And what's happened is, as the economy has shifted, most businesses that previously would have hired sustainability teams have let those teams go. So the top of our market got much larger. And then as regulation hit through California, through the SEC, and largely through supply chain pressure of the Fortune 500, smaller companies we're now getting requirements. So you have this, what happened was the ICP grew up and down, and it created a much larger space for us to really tackle. And with that, we've had to invest more in meeting regulation and making sure that our reporting standards, can comply with, Europe's new regulations. And there's a dizzying amount of things that businesses have to understand. We really had to invest in that stuff, but the overall mission has always been the same. It's just who that target ICP has really grown, over the course of the last, 10 months.
And Alex, talk to us a little bit about your the evolution of technology and the role that you see it playing both now and in the future in the fight against climate change, and anything that any insight that you can share with us around how that's specifically adopting and evolving within Greenplaces.
Our software and company is not that much different than like a carbon accounting like consultant. We still take in data and we analyze it and we give somebody back their carbon footprint. The difference is we've employed thousands of integrations, AI, machine learning, and data models to essentially automate the manual work required to do this. It's not uncommon for a client to send us 400,000 lines of an Excel sheet of every transaction they've done in the last year. What our system has to do is to ingest that data and assign it and say, this product was paper and paper was sourced from this country, and this is the emission factor for paper in this country. They bought, this flight, this is where it departed from, this is where it went to, this is the difference. And what AI has allowed us to do is to essentially automate a process of labeling and organizing data much, much, much faster than would be if somebody was doing this by hand, which means our carbon accountants now are 7 to 10 times more efficient than somebody doing the same work without it. Now, where AI will take us is we've got a data problem. We've got connections into more data sources for businesses, be it procurement to utility information to water information. But we also have external sources. We've got databases that pull local, federal, and state tax incentives. And eventually, we want to be able to automatically identify insights for businesses to make smarter decisions. So an example of that would be, let's say you're the CFO of a 2,000 person company. Let's say you're a distributor or something. We want to be able to scan through all of your transactions and say, currently you've been buying the Lenovo ThinkPad, and the emissions of that ThinkPad is this amount. If you were to switch to the Apple refurbished MacBook Air, that's similar in quality, you can actually reduce your emissions by 30 or 40%, in your supply chain, and an overall drop of 10% this year. And here's how much it will cost. And by the way, the federal government has an incentive to help you do that. But that can be applicable for everything from utility companies to parts companies to apparel companies, electronic manufacturers. All these businesses are investing trillions of dollars into a greener product. What no one's been able to do is, how do you translate that greener investment to the eyes of a CFO who's going to make these decisions? And that's too much data for a human to be able to run through. And so we'll employ more ML and more AI to be able to identify those insights and be able to essentially automatically recommend good business decisions for companies, no different than the way that Credit Karma or Mint.com helps me make better financial decisions because it's connected to all my financial data.
Well, and as you mentioned, Alex, and I'd be remiss if I didn't state that there are varying companies at varying levels of businesses that are performing similar analyses. And as you know, Bain and Company has partnered alongside Persephone this past year to serve our clients. And so for those who are interested in learning more either about Greenplaces or Persephone, I'll encourage you to go onto our Bain.com website. I will also use this as an opportunity to plug our recent CEO guide to sustainability that was published late last fall in 2023, which has really pragmatic advice for CEOs that are tackling challenges in sustainability. And your focus on the supply chain, there's a whole dedicated chapter in that report around it being actually just such a critical lever to the decarbonization efforts of companies and really an operational imperative. So encourage our audience to click through there, and we'll make sure that we have a link to that on the recording at the end of the recording. Alex, what's next for Greenplaces, and where can individuals, I shared they can go to Bain.com and look at for information around Persephone if folks are interested about learning more about Greenplaces. where can they go?
Certainly greenplaces.com, or email me, Alex at greenplaces.com. We host a fair amount of dinners, probably 3 or 4 dinners and roundtables a month with CEOs and professional services organizations, law firms, accounting firms, people that really understand this stuff in different markets. And it's a great way to meet other people that are doing this. I think, as of today, something like 10% of the top 100 law firms in the US, for example, trust Greenplaces, and that number is growing. We've embedded ourselves in the professional services community because these are the people that are going to help these companies. And so it's easy to engage with us if you want to join a dinner. We host them in Atlanta all the time. We had one in Philadelphia last week, one in New York tonight, and we just do those. We also host a fair number of webinars. We've got one coming up with Shepard Mullen to talk about the California legislation and the SEC rules. But reach out. And Persephone is a great company. We think of this as like Persephone and a Watershed are great for kind of the Fortune 500, and big companies. We're going to be more for that step down. So we fortunately don't see ourselves as competitive. I mean, it's no different than a lot of businesses where, the same solution's not going to work for everybody. We're not the SAP or the Workday. We're more of the JustWorks or Rippling, or systems that, are pretty tailor-made for companies of the mid-market size. But yeah, Alex at greenplaces.com is perfect.
Alex, you talked a bit about some of your Bain friends, colleagues, mentors that have supported you along your journey. And what advice would you have for current Bainies or Bain alum who are considering starting their own companies and how to tap into their own personal Bain networks?
My dad used to tell me that the same people you see on the way up are the same ones that you see on the way down. So it's just my best practice is just to always treat people well and always give where you can. I tried my best to keep in touch with people that I know are busy, and not with an ask, just with a check-in to see how you're doing and see how I can be helpful. And that's just always worked out for me. I think so many people, I think, live in this world of give and take. It's a lot of well, you did this for me. What can I do for you? And I just think that I don't think that plays out because I think it feels really transactional. I think if you genuinely find reasons to connect with people and continue to stay connected, you're surrounded already by so many smart people that it's just going to work out. Somebody in your class, multiple of you in your class will be really successful, and the vast majority of them are going to be partners or, run firms. They're smart, good people. And too many folks view this as, what can you do for me? And I think it becomes pretty clear later when they don't have those connections. I mean, I think in the last month, I've talked to a number of folks that we know that you probably don't, most people may not know at Bain anymore, but I have breakfast once every few months with Adam Duggan. I mean, I talk to all these folks. Jason Pate is an investor in my company. Baker Shogary is an investor in my company. I'm an investor in his company. Just stay in touch, that's the beauty of the network is just about being helpful. And I would say the same thing. If anybody's seeing this, says, I want to meet somebody like this, or I want to know some of these people, I don't need anything necessarily from you. Just reach out and hop on LinkedIn and send me a note. Happy to help in any way that I possibly can. It doesn't have to benefit me in any way. It just, it's good to do good for people, and it just ends up working out really well.
Again, Alex, really wonderful, great advice. Those names that you mentioned are names that I know and are beloved to me, really important mentors in my life, both Adam and Mark, both, and I ought to drop both of them a line. So it's a good reminder for me personally as well. So thank you. Well, now we get to move to our lightning round, just some fun things, because it's always good to humanize, although you candidly feel already very humanized in this podcast. But just some quick, lively, speedy conclusions to our time today. Do you have a current book that you are reading and feel like, gosh, everyone that's listening ought to be reading, or something you've read recently that you'd like to share?
I'm the worst person at this because I just don't read business books. I just don't like them. I'm reading a history of Romania right now. I find that really interesting. I think my takeaway of that is you just can't be one dimensional. I mean, I was a liberal arts student. I was very much and always have been the student of everything. And I think I have my best ideas when I'm not thinking about, sustainability. I'm thinking about other stuff. So I would just tell folks to like get out of the same stuff, like find other things that you're interested in, and continue to scratch those itches so that you can be more multidimensional and, come to better conclusions that may not be found in the next, get rich quick book. But that's what I'm reading, and it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, I'm going to write that one down. We very rarely get business books actually from our
Good.
guests. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's usually a novel or some type of nonfiction that's unrelated to the core line of work that the individual is working in for those very reasons. So that resonates. Are you a podcast person, Alex? And if so, do you have one that you really like?
I am. Yeah, I'm a big podcaster. So I like a lot of history, obviously, and probably my two favorite is Dan Carlin does a podcast, a history podcast that's outstanding and gets more in depth into the history of World War II to the Mongol Empire. It's really fascinating. And another one called The Rest is History, which is sort of a shorter format, but also equally interesting and in depth and great. But those are my two that I spend the most time with.
Awesome. What are you most excited about this month, Alex?
This month, I'm going to surprise my oldest son with a trip to New York. So my oldest is 6. I've got a 6, 5, 3-year-old boys, and then I have another boy or girl coming in June. But being that my wife is 8 months pregnant, and we've just gone through a lot of birthdays, we decided not to do a party for him, but he always talks about how much he wants to get to New York, see the big buildings. So we're going to surprise him in a few weeks and take him right after school and spend a couple nights in New York and get to see stuff. So he's really excited, and we are too.
That is super excited. I took him to New York for the first time when my middle son was 6, 5 years ago. And that was just a wonderfully incredible experience. To see the city through their new eyes, particularly if we don't live in a big city, was pretty awesome. And the museum, of course, the Museum of Natural History is a wonderful one to take them to. You'll have a wonderful time. So enjoy, and thanks for sharing that personal. For 3 boys and then 1 to come. Alex, your wife is a saint, as are you. I wish you the very best of luck. I have 2 boys and 1 girl, and that's about all I can handle.
It's a lot. It definitely puts things in perspective, and I think certainly makes the hard stuff at work a lot easier to deal with. So we've been really lucky, and Anne was my girlfriend when I was at Bain. So she's seen through all the times, and she knows what she married and got into, and I do too. And she's been able to be a consistent piece of my life for such a long time, and it's been amazing. So we're excited for the 4th and very much enjoying the 3 so far.
Awesome. In closing, Alex, would you like to share the best or worst piece of advice that you've ever received?
Well, I think one of the best advice was, when I was deciding what I was going to do next. So this is kind of going into my 3rd year at Bain, that whatever that period of time is where people start reaching out. And I was interviewing at a venture capital fund, a pretty prominent one, and got all the way to the top of the interview and met the main partner. And he said, what question do you have? Which the best answer is always, in my opinion, is like, if I come in here and I work really hard and I'm the first one in, last one out, can I be you one day, and just kind of that, I'm 22, mold me into something great. And I told him that, and he said, what are you kidding me? He's like, you think that I started my career as an analyst? You'll never be me. He was like, I started I don't remember what it was, DocuSign or something like that. He was like, I started this billion-dollar company. Like, you know, you basically spent your whole life not taking risks. Like you need to go out and do something. Like you've got to go build something of value if you ever want to be who I am. And anyway, so that contributed to me deciding to quit and start a company. So it was actually turned out to be really good advice. Obviously didn't get a job there, but odd things for somebody to bring up, but a very honest thing to say. And, you know, I think when you take a look back at your career, you know, and where it's progressing towards, sometimes you have to shake things up and try something, you know, and see what happens. And, you know, I think it was good advice for me. So certainly really appreciate that, but it was a very odd response that stuck with me.
Well, that is a great ending to our time together. Alex, it has been an absolute treat to catch up and hear about the incredible work that you're doing at Greenplaces and just in general to see you thriving so well post Bain. We're fortunate to have you as an alumnus of the firm. Thank you for paying it forward with so many individuals and your willingness to connect with anyone who reaches out. That is really just wonderful. As a reminder for folks, you can learn more about Greenplaces at greenplaces.com. And Alex, we'll look forward to watching your continued success. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And obviously, Bain means a whole lot to me. So if I can ever be helpful in any way to anybody, more than happy to help. So thank you.